just really hard to work with all these distractions. I need a place to turn my thoughts into actions. I was getting so...
Hello and welcome to the Eighth Note Sessions. I'm Mike Shamil.
And I'm Devin Mullen.
And our guest today is educator, musician, and engineer Marc Warner Hunt. Marc, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Yeah, thank you for making some time for the show. So can you give our listeners at home a little bit of rundown of what it's like to be a music educator in 2021?
Well, it's interesting about that right now because things have changed a bit, but it's exciting because it seems as though even though we had that shutdown for a while, the students actually are coming in and seem super excited and have specific goals in mind too of where they want to go. So it's been great every single day that now that we've been back in session with the students.
Have they come back with an appreciation of having those resources in front of them again? Because I know there's a lot of really cool pieces of home tech that you can use these days for recording. You know, I myself have a bunch of recording crap at home, but were they happy to come back into an environment where they had a really nice studio at their fingertips again?
I think so. There was a little bit of a pushback from them though when they use, the specific equipment that they have at home, and if we didn't have it in the classroom, you're like, well, I use this, and so I would have to have that conversation. It's like, well, that's great that you use FL Studios, for example, but when you're working at a commercial studio, they're not going to necessarily be using that, and you may start your project with that, but you really need to make to force yourself to make the jump into another software or DAW like Pro Tools, hopefully, because that's the one that most people are using, but obviously there's other ones out there. And I try to give them as much as possible, not to overwhelm them, but to give them choices. So the computers do have FL Studio on there, even though I kind of have a little bit of an issue with it, but they also have Pro Tools, they also have Logic, they also have Reason, they also have MPC on there, so there's like, what do you want to do?
Variety, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's all there, whatever you want, it's all there.
So something we were talking about is educating during lockdown and the suspension of having hands-on activities and the weird phenomenon of kids coming in freshman year having about half a year of a regular high school experience and coming back. Have you noticed just with the students any sort of lasting effect of that? Do you think that missing out on those years is something that kind of knocks you off course a little bit, or do you bounce back pretty quick from it, do you feel?
Okay, so I guess I would say tech-wise and academically, they seem about the same, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Socially, though, it's a different thing because you kind of have to teach them how to be in the classroom again, even though they're 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. They haven't been in a class with someone next to them for a year and a half. So I have been doing a lot of, almost like, here's how you're an assistant engineer or something like that, as opposed to, trying to come down on them. So I'm still giving them friendly reminders, let's put it that way, as opposed to coming down as like, Mr. Hunt's mad at us or whatever. It's like, not mad at anybody. It's like, I'm just trying to tell you, like, I would not be able to act that way at GCR, or I would not be able to act that way at BlackRock. It's like, we're not going to we can't spin in the chairs, or we can't.
Oh, yeah.
What I mean?
Yes.
Like normal, if you want to be employed here, whatever it is, McDonald's, recording studio, you can't act that way, So there's just a little bit of that's going on, but they definitely seem interested. They seem glad to be back in the classroom. Super supportive and accepting of each other, which is great. So to me, it's been great so far. It's been the first 10 weeks ends up next week November 5th, and it's been a super fast quarter for sure, in a good way.
Beautiful.
Oh, go ahead, Devin.
So, we're talking about this interruption of studies and the coming back to what is more of a quote unquote normal process of socialization and learning. It's interesting though, because broadly speaking, in entertainment and music and engineering, we're already seeing a lot of shifts and trends about how you engage with the work. We're seeing like the proliferation of independent studios, of really people working in this field having multiple career paths at the same time. It's very rare that we have a guest on this interview show that really is only doing one thing. Bearing that in mind, what do you think are some of the enduring fundamental approaches to making it forward in this field that you try to impart on students?
I think you have to show the client that you almost care more about their project than they do, in a way, that you also have an emotional attachment to it, and that you care about it, and that you're there to help them make the record or the video that they want to make. There's a lot of times where people will, and I've heard this from friends of mine, where they'll work with someone and they'll say, well, you have to play this, you have to use this amplifier because that's what I always use, or these are the drums we have to use because this is what I use always. And it's like, no, you want to make the record that the person wants to make, that was hiring you to do it. So for example, if you have an Americana band and they say, we want to make a Screamo band album, then that's the record you make with them. You know what I mean? I mean, you may be talking to them throughout the takes and mixing everything, saying like, I'm not really sure why you want to do this or whatever, but let's make it happen, but ultimately you want to make their record that they want to make. So I think being in the artist corner the whole time is good. I also think challenging yourself with things, putting yourself out into areas where maybe you're not as tech savvy or you don't know those skills yet, and force yourself to constantly learn those skills. That's going to help you. And I also think if you have some knowledge or skills of other parts of the entertainment business, let it be promotions, web design, video, whatever it is, those things can also help you generate more work with those clients that you just spent X amount of hours with working on their album, or maybe you spend X amount of hours working with them, putting their webpage up, and now they need something recorded. And if you can do it, then that's great. But just having multiple talents, I guess, or multiple things that you can produce for these people, I think is very helpful.
So on the whole, we're kind of faced with an interesting proposition there, because like we're saying here, you do need to have an array of skills. It's not, frankly, just good enough to know how to engineer. It's not, frankly, good enough to just know how to play guitar, because, there are over 7 billion people on the planet. There's probably someone who can do it the best, and the likelihood that it's you is very small.
Right.
On the flip side, access to resources, to programs like the ones that are put on by BOCES, they make entry into these fields, fields of knowledge a lot easier. On the whole, comparing, now sort of learning how to create and work in music and sound and entertainment, do you think it's easier now, or that the challenges have just changed?
I think the challenges just changed, because I don't know if it's easier. I almost think it's harder now. And the reason I'm going to say it's harder now is because technology is so easy to acquire. Like when I was in high school, so we're talking 86 through 1990, it's like if people wanted to do commercials, where would they do them? They would have to go to
Select Sound or something, right?
Yeah, like Select Sound, or they'd have to go to, they'd have to hire Channel 2 to produce the commercial for them, or they'd have to go to any of the other ad agencies that are down. I know there used to be one on the corner of like Maine and Chippewa, And then there's Full Circle Studios on Main Street or whatever too, right? And it's kind of like, there was all that stuff where it's like, this is kind of like the standard. But now, if you have someone who's talented and has a good eye, like they can get away with, I don't want to say you're not getting away with anything, but they can do like a really good job with not as much technology. And there's more people that are more interested in that every day. You know, like you have people that are, you know, they've got great studio spaces in their houses, you know, or they have a great eye for video, and they've got some great equipment on hand.
You know,
So,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, so I think it's changed in the sense where it could be sometimes seen as almost like it's oversaturated. You know, it's like, oh, you're not an engineer? Yeah, I thought everybody was an audio engineer. You know, it's where you think about, again, the 80s, it's like, oh, you're not in a band? Everyone's in a band. It's like it's, you know, it was more like the minority weren't in a band, you know, and it's like everyone's in a band.
You're right about having to cultivate your skills in a lot of directions. And I think in addition to that, you definitely have to work on being more adept, because even in the world of radio, when I worked in radio a few years ago as my main gig, we would send salespeople out with a Zoom H1 hooked up to an SM58, and they would go out to get the raw audio from their client reading their spot. And then that would get sent back to the editor back at the station. And, you know, now as an engineer, even if you're starting your own small studio, you're competing with stuff like that. You're right. Like that technology has sort of made things in a sense a little too convenient, because now you have to show clients, hey, yeah, you could totally take your Zoom H1 and an SM58 and you'll get something great, but I can get you something better than that. That's going to get you a better, you know, spot on the air.
Yeah. But you know what else is different too, I think, which is good, is that it seems like that community of video or audio is more supportive now than what it used to be, if that makes sense. Like, I think there was
cutthroat back in the old days than it is now, or
there might have been more like trash talk or whatever back in those. It was just like, and I'm not saying any of these people were the ones that did it, but like when it was basically Select Sound, Audio Magic, Trackmaster, you know, and there was also Marc Custom Studios, obviously, which is still around, but it wasn't like there was all these other engineers, producers, videographers that, you know, were setting up production spaces in their homes or renting like a small area or something, you know, where you'd hear like, oh, you went to him? He's terrible. You know, it seems more like now there's, what do you need done? You should go to this person, you know, or, hey, let me see if I can call this person and help me do it with you, or whatever it is. Now it seems like it's a little more supportive.
Well, I think that's part of, you know, broader strokes which are happening, and not to shoot off into politics or anything, but generally speaking, I think entertainment is being recognized as an actual facet of labor, and people who are really immersed in the field are recognizing that, and sort of recognizing that people who are, you know, also working with you aren't necessarily like, you know, the enemy or the competition. Like, there are people who are going to be able to, through the sort of quasi-barter economy that sometimes shows up in this field, support you and help you get your project done. I know one of our earliest guests, Denny Kremblis, spoke of this. It's really interesting. I mean, we have that news about what had happened on the set of Rust, and that's kind of, you know, the dead center in discussions about worker safety on film sets and everything. So I think you might be onto something with that. To step out of education world for a second, I wanted to hear about the music projects and engineering projects you're working on currently. What's exciting? What should we at home keep an eye out for?
Sure. Well, I recorded 4 new songs with Roger Bryan in the Orphans, and he's been releasing those once a month or every other week right now. He's released 2 of them so far. He's got 2 more that are going to be released in the upcoming weeks. Then I've been working with Gathering Ground on their new EP of 3 new songs with their full band. The drummer is actually the drummer from Piebald, which is pretty cool for sure. And then Blaine, who used to play bass, he's now playing guitar along with Ed. And then Patrick is on bass. We just finished up mixing Chelsea O'Donnell's Stress Dolls record, and she sent the masters to me the other day, which it sounds really cool. Another record by a band called At the Helm is coming up, and that's great songs, great harmonies, like really musical group, great live. And then there's just been some other small things here and there, but there's a lot of great music in the city. There always has been. And when you see your friends posting stuff or you see them playing live, it's like, I just want to get them back in the studio, whoever it is. If it's, I saw Josh Heatley was posting about the Pavers getting back together and maybe doing some music, and I did a couple recordings with the Pavers, and I sent him a message, within like 5 seconds, like, let me know when you want to go in. I'm ready to go. But there's a lot of cool stuff happening.
Indeed. So yeah, I mean, that's, I think the density of things you have going on right now is sort of, it's reflective of the career you've had. I mean, we didn't really run the gamut of every project you've been involved in for the past few decades, but you're a member of the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame. You've worked with Disney, worked with Villa Maria, Bosie's currently. You have connections at ESPN. It seems like there are just nets kind of being haphazardly whipped all over the place here. My
it's
question.
That Buffalo connection, it's like that Western New York connection.
It's true. It's a real thing. My question is, someone who really has seemed to have made a really good life of working in music and sound and entertainment in general. Do you have a sense that you've arrived at where you've been driving at, or are there still other places you want to go? Is the journey certainly not over at this point?
Okay, well, I guess I'll have to answer it a couple ways. So let's say as a musician, I think there has been that sense, in the sense where it's like, okay, like I'm starting to get better shows now. You can kind of pick and choose the shows. So at that point, I would say, like, I'm content there, I don't think I'm the best at it by any means, or think that there's no way to grow. But if we look at shows, I'm like, yeah, it's like, I like the shows that we're playing. We've got a good crowd. We've got a good set list. I like all the musicians that are in the bands, like as friends, and care about them all. As an engineer, producer, in all honesty, anytime I listen to something, I'm always like, I wish I could go back and just, tweak that hi-hat or whatever. And then I hear things that I did, 15 years ago or whatever on, the BNY vocal show. I'm like, oh, it sounds pretty good. There's something that I didn't really like. And I like what I do, but like when I listen back to it in my car, my headphones, I'm always like, I don't know. And then, it doesn't matter if I don't know, because the band is usually like, that's exactly how I wanted it. But I always think I could grow more with that, and with technology changing and, programs or workflows of the DAWs, like there's always, I think, room to grow in that aspect. And then lastly, I guess, just as an educator, that's almost like a day-to-day thing. It's like, well, today was terrible, and then, or it's like, today was great. And it's not necessarily because of the students. It's more of like, you look at the students' faces as you're trying to teach a lesson or something. You're like, wow, this is really a bad lesson, or, oh, this is a really good one, or this is in the middle, or whatever, so definitely not there yet as an educator, but trying every day for sure.
What's the hardest thing to really portray to your students at this point?
Um, hmm.
Like, is there a particular lesson that seems to be the harder to deliver to them?
You know what? It's not even like the computer part of the class that's the hardest part. That the hardest part is like having them realize that it's such a social business that they kind of have to master that first. Knowing that you're going to like make mistakes, you're going to say something unfortunately that might offend somebody here and there or whatever, and you shouldn't like own up to that. You should always like own up to something if you do that. But let me sum it up with what Robbie Konikoff, who was the owner for Audio Magic, told me when I was interning for him. And he said that the business is 90% social, 10% technical. And I always thought to him, like, what are you talking about? Like, there's this console here, there's all these microphones. What do you mean? And he was 100% correct. It's like, it's really about your interpersonal skills, how you carry yourself, how you listen to other people, how humble you are, like knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses. Like, that's what's going to get you successful. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily liking up the drum set or any of that other stuff. I mean, that's all good too, like that's part of it. But if people don't want to be in the room with you for 5 minutes, let alone 5 hours or 5 days, it doesn't matter how you mic up that drum set. And that's kind of like the hardest thing that I have to tell my students. I think that's like the hardest lesson that they learn, is just not realizing that. And I think most of it is because of their age. And at the age and the time of their life that they're in right now, they're just so like centered around themselves that they're not looking down the road yet or seeing like other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because they're young and they're trying to figure out, where they want to be in life. And so that's
right.
The thing that's on their mind. Where am I going to go to school? What am I going to do next? How am I going to have that life that I picture in my head?
Right. And they're not being rude or anything. They just don't have that, like, those soft skills yet that you would have in like a professional workplace. You know what I mean? Like, if you walk into, a news station or a video production house or, recording studio, like, you're not going to see everyone just sitting around with their feet up on subwoofers on their phone. But it's not going to, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to be working with clients, or they're going to be cleaning the studio, or they're going to be getting ready for a show, or they're going to be cleaning up after themselves, or whatever it is.
I mean, it's impossible to walk in the outer world if the underworld's uncharted.
Yeah.
I get it. So let's see. What else did we cover? And I bring it to you. Shamil, help me out here.
We talked about a variety of things, but I'm going to steer things for a moment into your career as a bass player, because we've talked about a lot of the really interesting technical and educational stuff, but we haven't explored Marc as the musician. Right now, I believe you play with Alison Pipitone and Rabbit Jaw. Tell us about your music from the point of view of Marc the musician.
Well, so I guess my influences growing up, that would be the first place to start, I guess. And when I listened to some of the stuff that I used to play early on, when I say the stuff I used to play, I mean like bass lines I would come up with, like you could tell that I was influenced by Simon Gallup from The Cure. You could tell that I had more of like an influence of like Tommy Stinson and obviously Ramones or whatever. As I've gotten older, for whatever reason, I seem to encompass more of like the Dee Dee Ramone side of things, as opposed to like trying to play the melodic bass lines. And I think that's because couple of things. One is, if you're playing on stage and things take a turn, not for the worst, but it takes a turn where it's like the song the song arrangement changes for some reason, trying to be more of that steady bassist, locking in with the drummer and supporting the singer and the guitar player, opposed to, hey, I'm the bass player and I do this like cool line here. And it's like, yeah, it is a cool line, but is it needed to be done right now? you know? So I guess just kind of like doing a little more picking and choosing, I guess, of like when to do that kind of stuff.
So just, focusing on getting into the pocket and then waiting for that opportunity where it's your turn to kind of show off your talents and throw a lick in there or something. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah. Just trying to be more of like that support group. You know what I mean? Like really locking in with the drummer. When I play with Pat Shaughnessy with Allison, he and I, we always lock in together. And we always have when we played in Bobo, together we were super, tight and kind of helped Frank and Jimmer kind of do their thing, but it's like Pat and I were kind of like the train that kept going down the track.
Now, when you were younger and you were first starting out as a musician, did you find yourself going to places like the Continental and going, I want to become a musician? That looks so cool. Or were you already just banging away and that's kind of where you followed the music?
You know what? It was really bizarre because I went to St. Joe's, and at that time, St. Joe's had live bands play their dances. So when we would go to those St. Joe's dances, it would be the Ramrods, the Real Wigs, the Great Train Robbery, The Moment, Nullstat, Electroman.
And I'm there playing in high schools.
Well, yeah,
wow.
Electroman, yeah, they played in a high school, and Goo Goo Dolls played at Mount St. Mary's actually back in '86, and that was like legendary for me, because it was like this whole thing, like, oh my God, they're not opening up for the Ramrods. That's like it's flip flopped. All of a sudden, like there's been this flip flop of like, no, these guys are the headlines. You're the opening band, whatever. And, seeing local bands, I think, is what made me want to do it, and originally I was a guitar player. And like the band was Tony Brock from Johnny Revolting, Brandon Delmont from Girl Pope, Pat Lyons, who is no longer with us, but he was in a band called Museum Spirit for a while. Richie Campagna. And then, then up for whatever reason, I started playing bass. Those are one of those things like, we don't have a bass player. Who's going to do it? It's like, I'm not going to, I guess I'm going to do it.
Not it. Oh, wait, I guess I am it.
So it was that. And then, yeah, of course, like going to see shows at River Rock, so going to see like 7 Seconds at River Rock or The Exploited, or, going to see the bands of the Continental. And luckily we did start getting booked there. Bud didn't realize how young we were when he booked us there. Like when I talk to him now, he's like, "You were 15?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I gave you guys a case of beer." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Thank you." I didn't know you guys were that young. Oh yeah. But yeah, like playing there, and the Adventure Club was cool, but just like, seeing all those, local bands that you looked up to, that I looked up to, like those are my rock stars in a way, like I didn't see any difference between them and The Cure or Echo and the Bunnymen or any of that. But to me, that was the same thing. It was just a different group, I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do. And listening to their music, I was always blown away. Like, how are you playing the rhythm guitar and soloing at the same time? Like, I didn't understand the whole overdub process, at 14.
That can be kind of magical.
Yeah.
Is that magic still with you today, Mark?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yes. See, that's the kind of stuff I always want to hear, because it's so easy in this industry to let yourself get jaded, and I'm guilty of it a little bit sometimes. Sometimes I just get so like pissed off about things that I'm just like, oh, why am I into this crap? It drives me crazy. But there is still that like magical bit that's just like, but we're like doing cool things. I'm pulling ideas out of my head and people are now listening to it. And yeah. I'm glad to hear that you still have that fire within you.
Yeah, when the whole pandemic hit, like this didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I mean, it worked out, but it didn't work out the way I wanted to. But you always think about, oh, if I had time, I could go downstairs and, write some music and blah, blah, blah. But it's like that time always isn't there. And it's not because you don't want to be there, but it's because like, what, I'd rather watch a movie with Shane, or I'd rather like, let's sit on the couch with the dogs, or let's go down and, go to this restaurant or something. But when we were all locked away, I'm like, I'm going to try to write a song a week, and I put it out there and because I don't write lyrics, I can't sing. And so I put out this thing on Facebook. Hey, does anyone want to collaborate with stuff? So it actually ended up being not a song a week, but Maria Sebastian and I have been like collaborating. We've done a couple releases already, which have turned out pretty cool. And we're going to do some more stuff, but it's just like, it's so bizarre because it's very much like I just bang it out. I send it to her. She sends me her lyrics back. Great, all set. It's like there's really no like edit process.
Is that under Adam Insult and the Injuries?
Yeah.
Listen
That's
to some
awesome.
of it for the interview. Yeah, good stuff.
Well,
But trying to very much like, if she says, "Hey, can you extend this chorus or something?" And of course. But just kind of like, this song's a minute long. I'm like, yep.
that's punk, baby.
But I don't know. Yeah. Or she'll say, this song, I'm going to say the same 5 words over again. Okay. It's cool.
Beautiful.
That is super cool. We're just about out of time. Devin, did you have any final questions for our guest today?
This will be a bit of a departure, but I feel like maybe you'd be a good guest to speak on it. Not everyone who watches our episodes at home necessarily was alive for the run of this particular venue, but it's one that sort of exists in story and has a legendary status in Buffalo music history. I was wondering, Mark, if you could tell us a little bit about why the Continental comes up so often as a venue.
Well, I can tell you why I think it comes up, so often. Bud Redding would be like one of the main guys to talk to for sure about that. But I think the reason that comes up so much is because it was one of the main places. It wasn't one of the first places, but it was one of the main places that allowed original music and promoted the original music, but also had a dance floor upstairs, obviously, for all like the new wave and punk stuff. And that was really, I think, the first draw to the place. But then they would have, Electroman and the other local groups playing, but they would also have, well-known groups coming in here and playing before they got big. Like a friend of mine told me that Cyndi Lauper played there before, like, what's that? She's so whatever. Girls Just Want to Have Fun, like that she was playing there right before that broke, and Generation X playing there, and the band X playing there, and just, almost like Mohawk, I guess, in a way. But at the time, there weren't other clubs like that, really. I mean, there was McVan's, right? But that was knocked down at some point. And that was on like the corner of Hurdle and Niagara Street.
I definitely, the way you're talking about it, though, I definitely do think a Mohawk Place, like kind of having that good mixture of local and national coming through.
Yeah. What was interesting about the Continental, too, though, was the headliners would go on first. So the headliner would go on at like midnight, and then the support bands would go on after the fact, so when you would play there, whoever was the booking agent. So again, at the time, Bud Redding was the one that would book us there. He'd say, all right, I've got an opportunity for you. What's that? How about Thursday night, 2 a.m.? Okay. And then if you did well, Thursday at 2 a.m., maybe you'll get a 1 a.m. slot. And then after you did well there, then maybe you would, headline on a Thursday. And then they would move you to you get 3 a.m. on Friday. And that would you would kind of move you up that way, so it wasn't like you would play first. It's like, no, you play last, and hopefully you have people that are going to stick around, because if you don't, then you're not necessarily going to play there again, which I thought was really kind of bizarre, but
it's interesting trial by fire.
Yeah.
Also brutal. I'm glad that you don't see too many shows going till like 4 a.m. tonight. I just don't have the end.
That was
old,
Yeah, that was tough. I remember when I would play the Continental with Evil Rufus K, that would be the same kind of a thing where it's like I would go home, I would set my alarm, and I would get up at 1 and head on down there to play our show, and then come back, whatever. And what was kind of like annoying about it, I guess, is that it's like I was going to school in Boston at the time, and Boston was like show starts at 7 and show's over by 11 o'clock p.m. or midnight at the very latest, because the bars closed in Massachusetts by 2. They're not open until 4.
Good job.
I've lived in places like that, and I was like, man, why is everyone drinking so hard? It's only like 11 o'clock, and it's like, oh, they're like trying to drink before the bell rings. I get so accustomed to that like late drinking hour that Buffalo, it's like you can really pace yourself and take your time. But yeah, but I guess on the flip side, when it comes to music, yeah, like playing at 2, 3 a.m. I've done that before. It sucks, and it is harder to keep people at the venue because they're either drunk as hell or they're tired as hell or both. So it's like it's a lot of work to really like keep them excited and interested. So wow. Right.
And now when you get shows, it's like, what time we going? Noon. Perfect.
And with that more prosperous present, where we go on at noon instead of 3 a.m. Shamil, why don't you take us out for this interview?
All right. Well, thank you everyone at home for watching, and thank you, Mark, for spending some time with us. This has been the Eighth Note Sessions. I'm Mike Shamil.
And I'm Devin Mullen.
And our guest today was Marc Warner Hunt. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for watching, everyone.
I was getting